Shabbat shalom, everyone. Hope you are doing well. This week's parsha is Vayera. Not Vayera, but Vayera. We're in the second parsha of the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot, and we're continuing with the story of Moshe and Aaron. So in last week's parsha, God appears to Moshe in the burning bush and tells Moshe that he will be the person to deliver the children of Israel from Egypt. And Moshe pushes back and says, I'm not someone who can do this. And God, of course, encourages him in very encouraging words. And so in this week's parsha, God gives Moshe even more information and tells Moshe to go to the people and tell them that God will redeem you, God will remove you from this land and take you to a land flowing with milk and honey. And when Moshe goes to tell the Jewish people this, it says that they do not heed mikotzer ruach, from their shortened breath. They were short of breath, they were tired, they were whatever. And so like the first practical explanation is like, yeah, they were like working really hard. They were just like tired and didn't want to listen. But the other explanation, which people kind of relate to today, is that they were being so distracted, so just like work and other things to focus on and trying to work for survival, that they didn't even have time to think about their own redemption, their own like being free. And this is something that's probably existed for forever, that when you have a class of people that you are oppressing, you keep them distracted as long as possible, keep them short of breath so they're not thinking about what's going on in their life, what's going on in the world, and until you're able to, until they don't want to revolt or anything. The Jewish people, of course, would have wanted to revolt, but they were being kept so busy that they didn't even think about it. And so they say that this is what it's said about modern day people with religion, that we are kept so busy, so looking elsewhere, that we don't stop to think about the source of everything. We don't stop to think about what religion could mean for us. So that's an interesting point. So the Jewish people were short of breath. And Moshe goes to God and says, the Jewish people didn't listen to me. How am I going to convince Pharaoh if I can't even convince the Jewish people? And so then God appoints Aaron to be Moshe's tongue, to be his speaker. And when that's why when we're talking about Moshe went down to Pharaoh to try to convince him to let the people go, Aaron is there too, because Aaron is the person who's speaking for Moshe. Because as we remember, Moshe has what we believe would be a speech impediment. Or maybe he just like is bad with words, but either way, Aaron's the better speaker, and so Aaron comes with him. So in this week's parsha, we have 7 of the 10 plagues. After the first one, Pharaoh, of course, famously hardens his heart. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then the 7th plague, which is boils. It says it doesn't in the rest of the parsha. Every time that Pharaoh hardens his heart, it's like vayitchazek libo et paro, or vichabed et paro, but it's always active that Pharaoh is the one who's hardening his own heart. But in the 7th plague, it says vaychazek Hashem et libo paro, or et libo, yeah, that it's God who's hardening Pharaoh's heart, because maybe at the 7th plague, Pharaoh would have given in and let the Jewish people go, at least for the time being. And so our commentators tell us that this was done by God to show the Jewish people how great their ruler could be. And the other thing is that, like, even though Pharaoh would have finally let them go after the boils, perhaps this was kind of a payback for his ego, that after all this time he wasn't willing to let them go, and finally he's able to let them go. Well, you need to be punished a little bit more than that. So there are still three more plagues that happen next week's parsha. But throughout all of these things, we have we think that we're so active in our lives, and of course we are to a degree. We can believe in free will as well as determinism. We have to believe that there is a grander path, but we also are making our own choices, and hopefully our own choices are falling into the grander path. But it's just interesting that Pharaoh was given free will for the first 7 plagues, and then afterward he was not. But he had 7 chances. Like, I don't know, 7 out of 10. That's still passing. So it's an interesting point. But yeah, and then this week's parsha is still kind of, it ends kind of sadly. It's like, and this, the 7th plague. I'm sorry, I said, okay, after the 6th plague, the boils, but the 7th plague was fire and ice, hail, and that was the 7th plague. And so even after devastating hail, Pharaoh still will not let the people go, and that's where this parsha ends. So I guess we'll pick it up next week. But yeah, remember to keep deep breaths, keep focused on the things that are important, and God willing, I will speak to you next week.